I was about to sign my company over to my daughter when Loretta, the woman who had kept my house for 22 years, walked into the living room carrying a silver tray. She set down a china cup of coffee, smiled at me the way she always did, and then, while my daughter Deborah watched from across the room, Loretta leaned down close to my ear and whispered 6 words that saved my life. "Don't drink it. Please trust me." 7 minutes later, my only daughter was convulsing on my living room floor, foam gathering at the corners of her mouth, because she had accidentally swallowed the poison she had prepared for me. My name is Amanda Houston. I'm 68 years old. I was born in a rented house on Auburn Avenue in Atlanta, Georgia, in the summer of 1958. And if you had told the little barefoot girl I used to be that one day her own flesh and blood would try to kill her for money, that little girl would have laughed in your face and run home to her mama. Because in my mama's house, we did not hurt the people who loved us. We did not poison the ones who fed us. And we certainly did not murder our mothers for a company our mothers built from a $200 pot of face cream stirred in a kitchen on Cascade Road. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to that Tuesday morning in October. October the 14th, to be exact. I remember the date the way some women remember their wedding anniversary, because that was the day I became a different woman. The Amanda Houston who sat down in her favorite wingback chair at 9 o'clock that morning was not the same Amanda Houston who stood up from that chair at 11. One of them died that day. The other one is the woman telling you this story. The morning started in the way every morning had started for the past 22 years. My grandmother's grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 5:30, and I opened my eyes in the bedroom I had shared with my late husband Reginald for 32 years. The sheets still smelled faintly of the lavender sachets Loretta tucked into the linen closet every Monday. Outside my window, a mockingbird was working through its repertoire in the crepe myrtle tree, and a thin October light was just beginning to slide across the hardwood floor my Reginald had laid down with his own 2 hands in the spring of 1984. I did what I had done every morning since I was 13 years old. I swung my feet over the side of the bed, planted them on the braided rug my mother had made during the Birmingham bus boycott, and I got down on my knees. I thanked the Lord for the breath in my body. I thanked Him for my daughter Deborah. I thanked Him for the company He had helped me build. I asked Him to watch over Loretta and her granddaughter Jasmine. I asked Him to watch over my pastor, Jeremiah Walker, who had been praying for me lately in a way I couldn't quite explain. And then I opened my mother's Bible, the one she had carried in her purse the day she took me to hear Dr. King preach at Ebenezer Baptist Church in 1963. And I read the 31st chapter of Proverbs out loud, the way she used to read it to me. "A virtuous woman, who can find her? For her price is far above rubies." I didn't know it yet, but that was the last morning I would ever read those words as the woman I used to be. Downstairs, the smell of buttermilk biscuits and Colombian coffee was already curling up through the floorboards. Loretta came in at 5:15 every weekday morning the way she had for 22 years, let herself in with her own key, and started breakfast before I even had my housecoat tied. Loretta Washington was 54 years old that October, a tall, big-boned woman from Macon with silver starting at her temples and hands that could make anything. A pie crust, a button on a blouse, a piece between 2 fighting children. Her own daughter Janelle had died of sickle cell complications 11 years earlier, and Loretta had been raising her granddaughter Jasmine on her own ever since. Jasmine called me Grandma Amanda. She was 6 years old, and she drew me pictures of Jesus with an afro because, as she explained one Sunday, "Jesus looked like us, Grandma Amanda. The preacher said so." I had that picture taped to my refrigerator next to a photograph of Deborah at 8 years old, standing on a wooden kitchen stool, carefully pressing a paper label onto a glass jar of the very first cream I ever sold. I want you to hold that picture of Deborah in your mind for a moment, because I need you to understand what I lost. In the photograph, my baby is wearing a pink corduroy jumper and 2 braids tied with yellow ribbons. Her tongue is poking out of the corner of her mouth in concentration. On the back of that picture, in my own handwriting, I had written, "Deborah, age 8, helping Mama with the very first batch. She said, 'Mama, when I grow up, I'm going to help you sell this cream to the whole world.'" For 33 years, I believed that promise. I built a company on the back of that promise. I turned down an offer of $3 million in 2001 because of that promise. I mortgaged my house in 2019 to give that little girl's husband a down payment on a mansion in Buckhead because of that promise. And on the morning of October 14th, that same little girl, now 41 years old, walked into my house carrying a cup of coffee laced with enough arsenic to kill a horse. But I am getting ahead of myself again. Forgive me. When you have carried a secret like this for as long as I have, sometimes it runs out of your mouth faster than you mean it to. Let me tell you who I was before all this. I was born Amanda Jean Prescott in June of 1958, the fifth and last child of Henry and Ruth Prescott of Sweet Auburn, Atlanta. My daddy worked at the Atlantic Steel Mill out on Northside Drive for 41 years, and the man never missed a day of work, not even the morning of my birth, because he said steel didn't pour itself and bills didn't pay themselves. My mama took in washing from the white ladies on Peachtree. She would walk 4 miles to their houses on Monday mornings with a wicker basket balanced on her hip, and she would walk 4 miles back on Friday afternoons with that same basket full of folded, ironed, starched clothes. They paid her 75 cents a bundle. My mama had a saying. She had a saying for everything, but this one stuck with me my whole life. She used to say, "Amanda, when a snake shows you its face, you thank the good Lord, because now you know where to crush its head." I didn't understand that saying when I was 7 years old. I understood it on October 14th at about 2:15 in the afternoon, sitting in a waiting room at Grady Memorial Hospital. My mama took me to hear Dr. King preach when I was 5 years old. I don't remember the sermon. I remember the heat and the way the grown folks fanned themselves with paper fans from the funeral home, and the way a big black man in a white shirt picked me up so I could see over the heads of the congregation. I remember my mama crying, and I remember thinking crying was something grown-ups only did at funerals, so I thought somebody had died. When I asked her about it later, she told me, "Baby, sometimes grown folks cry because something hasn't died yet. Sometimes we cry because something is being born." I think about that a lot now. I think my mama was crying because she could feel a new world being born, and she knew her little girl was going to get to walk around in it. I graduated from Booker T. Washington High School in 1976. I married Reginald Houston in 1982, the summer after he came back from his second tour in the Army. Reginald was a mechanic at a Chevrolet dealership on Ponce de Leon Avenue. He had the kindest hands of any man I ever met. Big hands, scarred hands, hands that could pull the engine out of a Caprice Classic on a Tuesday and braid our daughter's hair on a Sunday morning. He passed in December of 2014. Pancreatic cancer. 6 months from the diagnosis to the funeral. The last thing he said to me in the hospice bed at our house was, "Manda, keep Deborah close. She's going to need you." Lord, forgive me for what I'm about to say, because I love my husband, and I loved him then, and I love him now. But Reginald was wrong. Deborah did not need me. Deborah needed to get rid of me. I started Houston Beauty in the kitchen of our first house, a little shotgun rental on Simpson Road, in the spring of 1985. Deborah was 4 years old. I had been fighting eczema on my own face and arms my whole life, and everything sold in the drugstore for black women's skin either stripped us raw or broke us out worse. So I started mixing. Shea butter from a woman at the Buford Highway Flea Market who got it shipped from her cousin in Ghana. Apricot oil. Aloe vera from the plant on my windowsill. I made a batch in a stainless steel stock pot, cooled it in mason jars, and sold 6 jars to 6 women at Wheat Street Baptist Church for $3 apiece. By 1992, I had a storefront on Cascade Road. By 2001, I was in every black-owned beauty supply store in Georgia, Alabama, and South Carolina. By 2019, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution ran a Sunday feature on me titled "The Queen of Cascade Road," and Emory University asked me to speak at their commencement. By October of 2026, Houston Beauty was valued at $18 million, employed 47 people, and distributed in 11 states. $18 million, 47 people, 11 states. I want you to remember those numbers, because in a minute I'm going to tell you that my son-in-law had already stolen $380,000 of it, and my daughter had agreed to help him kill me for the rest. My daughter Deborah was born in February of 1985, the same year I mixed that first batch of cream. I used to joke that Houston Beauty and Deborah were twins. I was pregnant with both of them at the same time. She went to Oglethorpe Elementary, then to the Drew Charter School, then to Spelman College, class of 2007, where she graduated with a degree in marketing and a boyfriend named Terrence Carter. Terrence was a senior at Morehouse. He was tall, he was light-skinned, he had a smile that could melt the sugar in your iced tea, and he was studying accounting. At their graduation ceremony at Spelman, he walked up to me in a rented tuxedo and said, Mrs. Houston, with your permission, I'd like to marry your daughter one day, and I'd like to work for your company one day, and I'd like to earn both those privileges. I liked him. Reginald liked him. My mama, who was still alive then, looked at him from her wheelchair at the reception and said, "He's pretty. Too pretty." Watch that one, Amanda. I didn't listen. I should have listened. My mama saw the snake before I did. Terrence and Deborah got married at Wheat Street Baptist in 2009. Mayor Kasim Reed came to the wedding. We had sweet tea and salmon croquettes at the reception. In 2020, 6 years after Reginald passed, I hired Deborah as Vice President of Marketing at Houston Beauty. 2 years after that, in 2022, I hired Terrence as our Chief Financial Officer. I told myself I was doing what my mother had always told me to do. Keep your money in the family, Amanda. The white folks at the bank don't love you. Your folks at the table do. Lord have mercy on a foolish old woman's head. Let me tell you about the months before October 14th, and I'm going to tell you the truth, the way I see it now. Because hindsight, as the old folks say, is 20/20, and hindsight is also a cruel, cruel teacher. It started in the spring, April of 2026. Deborah invited me to Sunday dinner at their house in Buckhead, the house I had helped them buy. And over the peach cobbler, she said, "Mama, Terrence and I have been talking. You've worked so hard for so long. Have you thought about succession planning?" I remember I laughed. I said, "Baby, I'm 68 years old, not 98. Your mama still got a few good years left in her." Terrence smiled that smile of his from across the table and said, "Of course you do, Mother Houston. We just want to make sure everything is protected. For the legacy." For the legacy. Those were the exact words he used. I remember because I thought it was such a sweet thing to say. Legacy. My company was my legacy. My daughter was my legacy. I thought we were all on the same page. In May, Terrence asked me for access to my personal bank accounts. He said it was to help me with my taxes, that I was paying too much because I didn't know about some deduction, and that as my son-in-law and the company's CFO, he could save me thousands of dollars a year. I gave him my login information. I'm ashamed to write that sentence, but I'm telling you the truth. I gave a man who wanted me dead the keys to my savings. In June, Deborah started bringing me coffee in the mornings. She would drive over before work 3 times a week, carrying a paper cup from some new roaster she had discovered on Peachtree Street. "Mama, you have to try this one. It's a Kenyan blend. I had them grind it extra fine for you." The coffee tasted strange, a little bitter, a little metallic, but I drank it because my daughter had driven across town to bring it to me. And what kind of mother refuses a gift from her only child? In July, I started losing weight. 4 pounds, then 7, then 12. My pastor, Jeremiah Walker, pulled me aside after Sunday service and said, "Sister Amanda, are you eating?" I told him I was fine, just stressed at work. He held my hand a long time and said, "I'm going to keep you in my prayers, sister. The Lord has put you heavy on my heart this week." In August, I started getting dizzy. I would stand up from my desk and the room would tilt. I went to my doctor, Dr. Patricia Williamson at Piedmont, a lovely black woman I had trusted for 15 years, and she ran every test she could think of. My blood work came back strange. My liver enzymes were elevated. My iron was low, and there was something she couldn't quite identify. She wanted to run more tests. I told her I'd come back the next month. I never did, because Terrence told me over Sunday dinner that he had a cousin who was a nutritionist, and she said it was probably just perimenopause catching up with me at 68, and I should try her recommended supplements instead. I took the supplements. Of course I took the supplements. A fool and her life are soon parted. In September, my short-term memory started going. I would walk into a room and forget why. I would start a sentence and lose the end of it. I would sit at my desk and stare at contracts I had written myself and not recognize the language. At my annual physical, Dr. Williamson asked me, with real concern in her eyes, whether there was any history of dementia in my family. I said no. She said she wanted to refer me to a neurologist. Terrence drove me home from that appointment, and on the way he said, "Mother Houston, Deborah and I have been talking. Maybe it's time to start letting us take on more of the day-to-day. You've earned your rest." I looked out the car window at the dogwood trees on Howell Mill Road, and I thought, maybe he's right. Maybe I'm getting old. Maybe it's time. That was not getting old. That was arsenic. That was my son-in-law and my daughter very carefully, very patiently, very lovingly killing me one cup of coffee at a time and watching me blame myself for it. Now I want to tell you about Loretta, because without Loretta, I would be in a casket right now. And some of you watching this would be reading about my funeral in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution instead of listening to my voice. Loretta Washington had worked in my house for 22 years. She started when Deborah was 14, a quiet, awkward, big-footed teenager who didn't quite fit in at the Drew Charter School. Loretta used to pick her up from school, make her peanut butter sandwiches, and sit at the kitchen table with her while she did her homework. When Deborah got her first period, it was Loretta who handed her the box of pads from under the sink because I was at a trade show in Dallas. When Deborah got dumped by her junior prom date, it was Loretta she cried to first, before she cried to me. Loretta had buried her own daughter Janelle in 2015. She had raised Jasmine on her own since then, and I had quietly paid for Jasmine's tuition at a private school in East Point without ever mentioning it to Loretta, because my mama taught me that the left hand shouldn't know what the right hand is doing. Loretta knew my daughter. Loretta had watched my daughter grow up in her own kitchen, so to speak. And when something started to go wrong in the summer of 2026, Loretta noticed before I did. Loretta noticed because Loretta was looking, and I was not. I didn't know it at the time, but starting in late June, Loretta had started keeping a notebook. A small brown leather notebook she bought at the CVS on Ponce for $4.99. In that notebook, in her neat, careful penmanship, she had been writing down everything she saw. June 23rd. Miss Deborah come over with coffee again. Third time this week. Ms. Amanda says her stomach hurt after. I see Miss Deborah put something in from a little brown bottle in her purse when I was in the pantry. She did not see me watching. July 8th. Mr. Terrence in the office upstairs for 2 hours while Miss Amanda at the doctor. I come in to dust. He closed the laptop fast. When I vacuum the rug later, I find a paper in the trash can, half ripped. It's a life insurance policy on Amanda J. Houston. $2 million. Beneficiary Terrence L. Carter. August 14th. Ms. Amanda ate lunch I made her. Did not get dizzy. Miss Deborah came by at 4 p.m. with iced coffee. Ms. Amanda dizzy by 7 p.m. Could not get up from the chair. I stayed late and helped her to bed. September 2nd. Heard Miss Deborah and Mr. Terrence on the phone in the driveway when they thought nobody home. Mr. Terrence say another month, baby, maybe 6 weeks, then we done. Miss Deborah laughed. I know that laugh. I changed that child diapers. That was not her laugh. Loretta kept that notebook for 4 months. 4 months of watching my daughter try to murder me and being too afraid to tell me because Terrence had threatened to fire her twice already, and she had Jasmine to think about, and she wasn't sure I would believe her over my own flesh and blood. She was right to be unsure. I might not have believed her. Not before October 14th. The Sunday before that Tuesday, I was sitting on my front porch with my best friend Patricia Jenkins. Patricia and I had gone to Booker T. Washington High School together. She was a retired nurse, 67 years old, with 3 grown sons and a brand new granddaughter named Olivia. We were drinking sweet tea out of the tall green glasses I kept on the porch table. The October air was warm, and the light was that particular Georgia October gold, the kind of light that makes even an old woman feel like a girl again. Patricia was telling me about Olivia, about how she weighed 7 pounds 4 ounces and she had her daddy's ears, and when Patricia held her for the first time, she cried so hard she couldn't see. I laughed. I told her I remembered crying like that the first time I held Deborah at Grady Memorial 41 years ago. Patricia looked at me in a funny way then. She set her glass of tea down. She said, "Amanda, you okay? You look tired, girl." I said I was fine. I said I had just been working too hard. She didn't look like she believed me. She reached across the porch table, and she took my hand in both of hers, the way she had taken the hands of dying patients for 40 years, and she said, "Amanda Jean Prescott, you call me if you need me. You hear? Day or night. I don't care if it's 3 in the morning. You call me." I laughed. I said, "Patricia, what in the world would I need you for at 3 in the morning?" She didn't laugh. She squeezed my hand and she said, "I don't know, baby. I don't know, I just got a feeling." I kissed her on the cheek when she left. I watched her walk down my front steps to her silver Honda Accord. I watched her drive away down Cascade Road in the October sunset, and I stood on my porch in my bare feet on the warm concrete, and I thanked the Lord for my best friend of 52 years. That was the last peaceful Sunday I would ever have in that house. 2 days later, on Tuesday morning, October 14th, at 9:37 in the morning, My daughter Deborah rang my doorbell with a paper cup of coffee in her hand, and the life I thought I was living came to an end. My daughter rang my doorbell at 9:37 on the morning of October 14th. I remember the time because I had just finished my devotional reading and glanced at the grandfather clock in the hallway as I walked to the door. 9:37. The bell rang twice, short and cheerful, the way Deborah always rang it. And for the last time in my life, I opened my front door without fear. She was standing on my porch in a cream-colored pantsuit with pearl earrings, her hair pulled back in the sleek low bun she had started wearing after she turned 40. In one hand, she held a small white bakery box tied with red string. In the other hand, she held a cardboard tray with 3 paper cups of coffee. Behind her, coming up the walk with his leather briefcase, was my son-in-law Terrence, smiling that salesman smile of his. "Morning, Mama." Deborah leaned in and kissed my cheek. Her lips were cold. "I brought peach turnovers from that new place on Peachtree, and I got you the Kenyan blend again. I know how you love it." I did not love it. I had never loved it. I had been drinking it for 4 months because my daughter brought it to me, and I thought love tasted like whatever your child put in your hand. "Come on in, baby." I held the door open. "Terrence, you too. Let me take those." Terrence handed me his briefcase and said, "Let me get the coffee, Mother Houston. You know how clumsy I am." He was not clumsy. Terrence Carter had never been clumsy a day in his life. Terrence Carter was a man who ironed his own pocket squares. But I didn't know any of that yet, so I laughed and let him carry the tray into my living room, where my grandmother's china cabinet stood in the corner and my wedding photograph from 1982 sat on the mantelpiece, and my mother's Bible lay open on the coffee table to the 31st chapter of Proverbs. We sat down. Deborah took the sofa. Terrence took the armchair closest to the window. I took my usual place in the wingback chair by the fireplace, the chair Reginald had bought me for our 20th anniversary. Terrence set the cardboard tray on the coffee table and handed me a paper cup. My name was written on the side in black marker. Amanda, in Deborah's handwriting. "Before we get started, Mama, drink your coffee while it's hot." Deborah smiled at me. "You know how you get when you don't have your caffeine. Now I want you to understand something." At that moment, at 9:41 on Tuesday morning, I had no reason in the world to think my daughter was trying to kill me. I had every reason to think the opposite. She had driven across Atlanta in rush-hour traffic to bring me pastries and coffee. She was sitting on my sofa wearing the pearl earrings I had given her for her 21st birthday. She had called me Mama. I had carried that girl in my body for 9 months. I had nursed her from my own breast. I had sat up with her through 3 bouts of pneumonia and a broken arm and a broken heart in the 9th grade. You cannot understand unless you are a mother. And even then, you cannot understand unless you are the mother of an only child who buried her husband 12 years ago and built her whole remaining life around that child. Deborah was not just my daughter. Deborah was every person I had left in the world who shared my blood. Deborah was my mama and my daddy and my Reginald, all living on in the one person I had loved into existence. I picked up that cup of coffee. I brought it to my lips. I took a sip. The coffee tasted bitter. Not the bitter of strong roast, the bitter of something chemical, something that did not belong in any being grown in any soil on God's earth. But I had been drinking this same bitter coffee 3 mornings a week since June, and by October, my mouth had stopped registering it as wrong. My mouth had started registering it as what my daughter's love tasted like. I took a second sip, and then the kitchen door swung open, and Loretta Washington walked into my living room carrying a silver serving tray with nothing on it. And the next 60 seconds of my life decided whether I would live or die. Loretta was wearing the navy blue house dress she wore on Tuesdays. Her silver gray hair was pulled back in a low twist. In her left hand she carried the empty silver tray, polished to a mirror shine, and in her right hand she carried a white linen cloth as if she were about to dust something, although I had dusted my own living room that morning, and there was nothing to dust. She walked across the oriental rug my mother had saved for a year to buy me in 1985, and she stopped beside my chair. "Miss Amanda, I'm so sorry to interrupt," Loretta said in her quietest voice. "I was just going to polish the picture frames above the mantel." Deborah's eyes flicked up at Loretta. I saw it. I remember it now the way you remember a single frame in a movie when the whole rest of the movie has ended. Deborah's eyes flicked up, and for just 1/2 of 1 second, something hard and sharp came into her face. Then she smiled. "Loretta, honey, could you do that a little later? Mama and I are having an important talk." "Yes, ma'am." I'm so sorry, Miss Deborah. And then Loretta, who had carried heavy trays across my kitchen floor 6 days a week for 22 years, who had never once dropped so much as a coffee spoon, Loretta stumbled. Her right foot caught the edge of the oriental rug, and the silver tray in her hand came down hard against the arm of my chair, and Loretta fell forward against my shoulder, and the paper cup of coffee I was holding tipped sideways, and half of it poured out onto the skirt of my house dress and onto the rug my mother bought me. Oh, Lord, Miss Amanda, I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. Loretta was on her knees now, pressing the white linen cloth against my skirt, her face 4 inches from mine, and with her back turned to Deborah and Terrence, with her lips barely moving, Loretta Washington whispered 6 words into my ear. Don't drink it. Please trust me. I cannot tell you what I felt in that moment. I have tried to tell you for the past year, in therapy rooms and on my front porch with Patricia, and in my prayer closet at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I cannot find the words. The closest I can come is this. Have you ever been walking down a street on a sunny afternoon, and a voice inside you, a voice that isn't your own, tells you to cross to the other side, and you cross? And a minute later, a man with a gun walks out of the building you would have walked past? That voice is older than you are. That voice belongs to every woman in your line, going all the way back to the first one. That voice belonged to my mother, and the mother of her mother, who was brought to South Carolina in chains in 1798. That voice was sitting on its knees in front of me in a navy blue house dress, and it was telling me my only child was trying to murder me. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not even change the expression on my face. I am a black woman who has run a business in the American South for 41 years. I know how to hold my face. It's all right, Loretta, I said. I heard my own voice come out steady. These things happen. Go on and get me a hand towel from the kitchen, baby. Yes, ma'am. Right away, ma'am. Loretta stood up. She picked up her empty tray. She walked back across the rug toward the kitchen, and as she passed behind the sofa where Deborah was sitting, her elbow caught the edge of the cardboard coffee tray on the coffee table, and the 2 remaining cups of coffee, Terrence's cup and Deborah's cup, went flying across the Persian rug in a brown wave. Oh, good Lord, Miss Deborah. I don't know what's wrong with me this morning. Loretta. Terrence was on his feet. His face was not smiling now. His face was the color of ash under his light brown skin. Are you out of your damn mind? Terrence. Deborah's voice was sharp. I heard it. I had never heard her speak to her husband in that voice before. It's fine. It's just coffee. But it was not just coffee, and all 3 of us in that room knew it. I looked at my daughter across the coffee table, across the spilled brown puddle on the rug, and I watched her face. I watched the quick flicker of calculation behind her eyes. I watched her try to decide what came next, now that the 2nd and 3rd cups were gone and only my cup was left, still half full of bitter coffee in my hand. I watched her decide. Mama, why don't you finish what you have and I'll run out to the car and grab the replacement cup I brought. I got an extra just in case. She stood up. Terrence, come help me. Sit down, baby. I set my cup down on the end table beside my chair, next to my mother's Bible. Let's not worry about the coffee. Let's just talk. Deborah sat back down, slowly. Her eyes did not leave my face, and I do not know how to explain what I saw in her eyes then, except to say that I saw my daughter, and I saw a stranger, and they were the same person, and the stranger won. Actually, Mama, I insist. Let me just run to the car. It'll take 2 minutes. Deborah Ruth Houston Carter. I used her full name the way my mother used to use mine. You sit down on that sofa and you have a conversation with your mother. She sat. Loretta came back in from the kitchen with a stack of white hand towels. She knelt down on the rug and began blotting up the spilled coffee. Her face turned down toward the floor, her hands working steadily. Every few seconds she glanced up at me, and every few seconds I glanced down at her, and we were having a conversation that my daughter and her husband could not hear. Now, Deborah, I said, folding my hands in my lap the way Reginald used to fold his hands when he was about to have a serious conversation. What did you want to talk to me about this morning? Terrence cleared his throat. He reached for his briefcase. Mother Houston, we wanted to discuss the succession plan. We've had our attorney draft some documents for your review. There's a transfer of authority, a power of attorney for business decisions, and an amendment to the trust structure. Nothing is final, of course. We just wanted to begin the conversation today. He pulled a thick stack of papers out of the briefcase and laid them on the coffee table on top of my mother's Bible. Right on top of the Bible. He did not move it. He laid his papers on top of my mother's Bible and slid the whole stack toward me. And here is where I want to stop and tell you something, because some of you listening to this are going to ask me later. How did you know, Amanda? How did you know in that moment that it was really happening? How did you know Loretta wasn't just a confused old woman and your daughter wasn't just trying to help you? I knew because of the Bible. I knew because my son-in-law, a man raised by his grandmother in a church home in Augusta, Georgia, a man who had taught Sunday school at Big Bethel AME for 3 years, laid a stack of legal papers on top of my mother's Bible and did not even look down. He did not see it. He did not see the Bible. He saw a surface. He saw a table. He was so far gone from the boy he had pretended to be that he could not even perform the basic reverence of moving a black mother's Bible before he laid his schemes on top of it. That was when I knew. Terrence. I reached out and I lifted his stack of papers up off my mother's Bible. I set the papers down on the end table next to my coffee cup. I closed the Bible and laid my right hand flat on the cover. I'm going to need a minute to look these over. Why don't you and Deborah have some of those peach turnovers Deborah brought? Mama, the coffee. Deborah Ruth, eat a turnover, baby. Let your mother read. She opened the bakery box. She took out a turnover. She bit into it. I watched her chew. While she chewed, I leaned forward and picked up the paper cup of coffee from the end table beside me. I made a small show of taking a sip. I brought the cup to my lips. I let the coffee touch my lips. I did not let it pass them. I held the cup there for 3 full seconds, and then I set it back down. Deborah was watching me. She smiled. She took another bite of turnover. It's good, Mama, isn't it? It's wonderful, baby. I picked up the stack of legal papers. I pretended to read them. I did not read them. I could not have read them if the Lord himself had been turning the pages for me. Because my hands were shaking, and my vision was swimming, and my heart was beating so hard against my ribs, I was certain they could hear it across the room. But my face stayed smooth. My face stayed the face of a 68-year-old black woman whose mother had taught her that when the white folks at the bank asked you a question you did not like, you smiled and you said, "Let me think on that, sir," while your mind raced a mile a minute behind your teeth. Loretta finished blotting the rug. She stood up with her arms full of wet brown towels. She said, "Miss Amanda, I'm going to go soak these in the kitchen. Will you be all right?" "I'll be fine, Loretta. Thank you." She walked out. As she passed the end table beside me, she did not look at me. But her hand brushed mine for just 1 second, and in that second she pressed something small and cold into my palm. It was the silver spoon from the sugar bowl on my kitchen counter. I closed my fingers around it. I want you to picture the living room now, because I am about to tell you about the next 60 seconds. And they were the longest 60 seconds of my life. Deborah was on the sofa, chewing a turnover and watching me read. Terrence was in the armchair by the window, tapping on his phone. My coffee cup, half full of bitter brown liquid laced with enough arsenic to stop a horse's heart, was on the end table to my right. Beside it was my mother's closed Bible. In my left hand, under the stack of legal papers, I was holding a silver sugar spoon. Loretta came back into the living room carrying a fresh dish towel. "Miss Amanda, I noticed the picture frame on the mantel is a little crooked. Do you want me to straighten it?" "Yes, baby, would you?" She walked past my chair. She walked to the mantelpiece. She reached up with both hands to straighten my wedding photograph from 1982, the one of Reginald and me standing in front of Wheat Street Baptist, him in his rented tuxedo, and me in the dress my mother sewed on her Singer. As Loretta stretched up to reach the frame, she said in her ordinary voice, "Miss Deborah, would you like me to warm up your coffee, baby? I think I could make a fresh pot." Deborah's head turned toward Loretta on the mantel. For exactly 1 second and a half, my daughter's eyes were not on me. I used my right hand to pick up my coffee cup. I used my left hand to pick up Deborah's coffee cup from the coffee table, the one that had been knocked over, the one that still had a sip or two left in the bottom from before Loretta's elbow caught it. I set my cup down where Deborah's had been. I set Deborah's cup down where mine had been. I put my silver sugar spoon into the pocket of my house dress. It took maybe 1 full second, maybe less. When Deborah turned back around, her eyes came back to me and she smiled. She did not look at the cups. She did not see what had happened. She was too busy watching her mama read the papers that were going to make her rich. "That's okay, Loretta," Deborah said. "Don't make a fresh pot. I still have a little left in mine." And she reached out across the coffee table and she picked up the paper cup with my name written on it in her own handwriting, and she took a long drink. "Mama," she said, setting it back down, "are you almost finished reading?" because I really do want to talk about this before Terrence has to get back to the office. I looked at her over the top of the legal papers. Baby, I am almost finished. She took another drink. Terrence looked up from his phone. Babe, what are you drinking? My coffee. I thought Loretta spilled. She didn't spill all of it. Terrence stood up. His face went still. Babe, put the cup down. What? Put the cup down. Terrence, what is wrong with... It hit her in the middle of that sentence. I watched it happen. I will watch it happen for the rest of my life. My daughter's face went pale, and then it went gray, and then a thin line of sweat broke out along her hairline, and she put her hand on her forehead and said, I don't feel... She did not finish the word. She slid sideways off the sofa and onto the oriental rug, and her body began to seize. Terrence screamed. I don't think he knew he was screaming. He threw himself down on the rug beside her, his hands on her shoulders, shouting her name. Deborah! Deborah, baby, look at me, baby, stay with me. Loretta was already on the phone to 911. I was still sitting in my chair. I want you to understand something. I did not move. I did not stand up. I did not kneel down beside my only child. I sat in my wingback chair with Terrence's legal papers in my lap, and I watched my daughter's body jerk on the rug my mother had saved for a year to buy me, and I felt nothing. There was no room inside me for feeling. My body had filled up with something else, something cold and gray and heavy, and there was no space left for a mother's love. That is the hardest sentence I have ever said out loud. Deborah's eyes rolled back. Foam gathered at the corner of her mouth. Terrence was weeping now, the kind of weeping I had only ever heard one other time, from a man at Reginald's funeral whose son had died the week before. But Terrence was not weeping for my daughter. I knew that even then. Terrence was weeping for the money. Terrence was weeping because the wrong person had drunk the coffee, and he knew it, and I knew he knew it, and he could feel $18 million slipping away from him one convulsion at a time. The paramedics arrived in 7 minutes. They were 2 young black men from the Grady Ambulance Service. They were gentle with Deborah. They strapped her to a gurney, and they carried her out my front door and down the steps Reginald had poured concrete for in 1994. And the older one, the one with the kind eyes, turned to me at the door and said, Ma'am, are you her mother? Do you want to ride with us? I looked at my daughter strapped to the stretcher. I looked at Terrence standing beside her in his tailored suit, his hand on her knee. No, son, I said. I'll drive myself. I closed my front door. I walked back into my living room. I sat down in my wingback chair, and for the first time since Loretta whispered in my ear, I looked at Loretta Washington. And Loretta Washington looked back at me, and neither one of us said a word for a long, long time. Finally, Loretta said, Miss Amanda? Loretta, I have been keeping a book. I know you have. For 4 months. I know, baby. She pulled the brown leather notebook out of the pocket of her house dress. She held it out to me. I took it. I opened it. I read the first 3 entries. I closed it. Loretta, I said, go get your coat. You and I are going to the hospital, and then you and I are going to a lawyer, and then you and I are going to the police, and in that order. Yes, ma'am. And Loretta. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. She began to cry. I had known Loretta Washington for 22 years, and I had never seen her shed a tear, not even at Janelle's funeral. She stood in the middle of my living room in her navy blue house dress with a wet dish towel in her hand, and she cried the way women cry when they have held up a house for too long. I got up out of my chair. I walked across the rug to her. I put my arms around her. I held her. It's all right, baby, I said. It's all right. Mama's here. I do not know which of us I was talking to. We drove to Grady Memorial in my Cadillac. Loretta rode in the passenger seat, her hands folded in her lap, her brown leather notebook sitting on her knees. I drove with both hands on the wheel the way my daddy taught me to drive in 1975. Down Cascade Road, right onto Lee Street, across the Martin Luther King Jr. Drive, through the heart of the city I had lived in my whole life. It was 11 o'clock on a Tuesday morning in October. The leaves on the oak trees were just starting to turn. A church bus from Ebenezer Baptist passed me at a red light, and a little boy in the window waved at me, and I waved back. My daughter was in an ambulance somewhere ahead of us, and I had just let her swallow the poison she had made for me, and I was waving at a child on a church bus. That is what shock does. It makes a woman wave at children while her heart is turning into a stone in her chest. At the hospital, they put Deborah in a bed in the emergency department. The attending physician was a tall, light-skinned black woman named Dr. Hannah Mitchell, about 40 years old, with natural hair pulled back in a puff. She took one look at the monitors and one look at Deborah's pupils, and she said the word out loud before anyone else did. Arsenic. Terrence was in the hallway on his phone. I heard him through the curtain. He was talking to a lawyer. He was not talking about his wife. He was talking about the company. Dr. Mitchell turned to me. "Ma'am, are you her mother?" "Yes, I am." "Ma'am, your daughter has been poisoned. I need to ask you some questions, and I need you to answer me truthfully. Do you understand?" "I understand, doctor." "Where was the poison? What did she ingest?" I opened my mouth. I closed it. I opened it again. "Doctor, before I answer that question, I need to speak to a detective. I need to speak to a detective right now, today, in this hospital, and I need him to hear what I have to say before I say it to anyone else." Dr. Mitchell looked at me a long time. Then she turned to the nurse beside her. "Page Hospital Security. I want an Atlanta PD officer in this room in 15 minutes, and I want this patient moved to a private room now. No visitors except her mother. Not her husband. Nobody." "Yes, doctor." Dr. Mitchell turned back to me. She lowered her voice. "Mrs. Houston, am I protecting the right person?" "Yes, doctor, you are." She nodded once. She walked out of the curtain and straight up to my son-in-law in the hallway, and I heard her say, in her calmest, most professional voice, "Sir, I need to ask you to step into the waiting area. We are moving your wife to a secure unit, and family contact will be restricted while we stabilize her." "What? No, I'm her husband. Sir, please step into the waiting area." I sat down on the plastic chair beside Deborah's bed. I looked at my daughter's face. Her eyes were closed. The ventilator was breathing for her. A line of IV fluid ran into her left arm, and another line ran into her right, and a third line of something darker ran into her neck. Her beautiful hair, the hair I had combed and braided and oiled for 22 years, was matted with sweat against the pillow. I leaned down close to her ear, the way Loretta had leaned down close to my ear that morning, and I whispered 3 words into my daughter's ear that I had been whispering to her since she was a baby in my arms. "Mama loves you." Then I straightened up, and I walked out of that hospital room, and I did not come back for 3 days. The detective who came to the hospital that afternoon was a man named Raymond Booker, 62 years old, retired Atlanta PD, now working private, although Dr. Mitchell had called him personally because her uncle had served with him for 30 years, and she trusted him the way you trust family. Raymond Booker was a big man, 6'3", built like an old oak tree, with a clean-shaven head and a gray goatee and eyes that had seen everything a man could see in the city of Atlanta for 4 decades. He listened to me for 2 hours in a small consultation room on the 3rd floor of Grady Memorial. He listened to Loretta for another hour after me. He took the brown leather notebook. He read every entry. He looked up at Loretta when he was done and he said, "Ma'am, in 40 years of police work, I have never seen civilian documentation this clean. You just gave us the whole case." Loretta dropped her eyes. "I just wrote down what I saw." "Ma'am, you saved this woman's life." Raymond Booker turns to me. "Mrs. Houston, I need to tell you something, and I need you to brace yourself." "Tell me, detective." "Your son-in-law has been talking to 3 different lawyers in the last 90 minutes. One of them is Jonathan Blackwell, which means he has money to spend. He is not talking about your daughter. He is talking about an asset freeze on your company accounts." "I understand." "Mrs. Houston, do you have a lawyer of your own?" "I do, detective." "Do you trust her?" "Her name is Angela Robinson. Her mother was my mother's best friend. I would trust her with my soul." "Then I am going to ask you to call her right now, from this room, and I am going to stand here while you do it. Because starting in about 1 hour, your son-in-law is going to try to do something to your company that will be very hard to undo. And the only person who can stop him is you." I took my phone out of my purse. I called Angela Robinson. It was 3:14 in the afternoon on Tuesday, October 14th, 2026. Angela picked up on the second ring. "Auntie Amanda?" "Angela." "Baby, I need you to meet me at my house at 7 o'clock tonight. I need you to bring your best litigator and your best forensic accountant. My son-in-law and my daughter tried to poison me this morning. My daughter drank it by mistake. She is alive. I am alive. And I am going to burn them to the ground. Legally. Thoroughly. Without mercy. Are you with me?" There was a long silence on the phone. Then Angela Robinson, 38 years old, graduate of Howard Law, daughter of my mother's best friend, said the words I needed to hear. "Auntie, I'm with you. I'll be there at 7. I'll bring a whole army." I hung up the phone. I looked at Raymond Booker. "Detective?" "Yes, ma'am." "I want to hire you, too. Starting right now. I need you to find out everything about my son-in-law. Every account, every phone number, every woman, every lie. I want it all on my kitchen table by Friday." Raymond Booker looked at me for a long moment. Then he did something I did not expect. He took off the gray felt hat he had been holding in his lap. He pressed it to his chest. And he said, in a voice so quiet I almost did not hear him, "Mrs. Houston, my mother worked at your Cascade Road store in 1994. You gave her a job when nobody else would hire a woman with a prison record. She died last year. Before she died, she told me, 'Raymond, if that Houston woman ever needs anything, you do it free. You hear me, boy? You do it free.'" I looked at him. He looked at me. "I'll take the case, ma'am. No charge. And I am going to find every last thing." That night, at 11:47 p.m., I sat alone in my living room. The legal papers Terrence had laid on top of my mother's Bible were in a pile on the coffee table. The brown leather notebook was in my lap. My mother's Bible was open on my knees to Proverbs 31. A single lamp was on in the corner of the room. Loretta had gone home to Jasmine. Angela Robinson and her team had left at 11. I was alone in the big house on Cascade Road with the sound of the grandfather clock in the hallway and the sound of my own breathing and nothing else. I put the notebook down. I put the Bible down. I walked through the house. I walked into Deborah's old bedroom, which I had kept exactly the way she left it when she married Terrence 17 years ago. Her high school graduation robe still hung in the closet. Her Spelman pennant was still on the wall. On the dresser, in a silver frame, was a photograph of Deborah at 8 years old, standing on a wooden kitchen stool, pressing a paper label onto a glass jar of cream. "Mama, when I grow up, I'm going to help you sell this cream to the whole world." I picked up the photograph. I held it in both hands. "And I want to tell you the truth. I want to tell you the truth of what happened in that room, because if I lie to you about this, I cannot tell you the rest of the story." I stood in my daughter's childhood bedroom at midnight, on the day she had tried to kill me, and I cried. I cried for an hour. I cried the way you cry when something has died. Because something had. The little girl on the wooden stool had died. The little girl who promised me the whole world had died, and a stranger was walking around in her body, and the stranger had brought poison into my house in a paper cup. I cried until I could not cry anymore. And when I could not cry anymore, I opened my mother's Bible, which I had brought with me into that bedroom, and I turned to the blank page at the very back, the page where my mother used to write little notes to herself in pencil. There was a note there, a note I had read 100 times before without ever really reading it. In my mother's thin, shaky handwriting, in pencil, dated May 1975, when I was 17 years old, "Amanda, my daughter, sometimes the Lord allows betrayal not to destroy you, but to show you who you truly are when there is no one left on your side. Remember, baby, a snake that shows itself is a snake you can defeat." I sat down on my daughter's childhood bed. I read the note 3 times. Then I closed my mother's Bible. I stood up. I walked back down the hallway to my living room. I sat down in my wingback chair. I picked up the phone. I called Angela Robinson at 12:23 in the morning. "Auntie, is everything all right?" "Angela, listen to me. Tomorrow morning, I want you to freeze every company account Terrence has access to. I want you to put a forensic hold on every transaction he has made for the last 3 years. I want you to draft a new will that leaves every dollar of my personal estate to a foundation I'm going to set up this week, the Amanda Houston Foundation, to fund Black women entrepreneurs in the South." And Angela, "Yes, Auntie. I want you to draft disinheritance papers." There was a long pause. "For Deborah, Auntie?" I closed my eyes. I saw my daughter on the rug, convulsing. I saw my daughter at 8 years old on a wooden stool, pressing a label onto a jar. "Angela, draft the papers. I don't know yet if I'll sign them, but draft them." "Yes, Auntie." "Good night, baby. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we start." I hung up the phone. I sat alone in my living room. The grandfather clock chimed 1 o'clock in the morning. I was 68 years old. My husband had been dead for 12 years. My only child was in a hospital bed across town, breathing on a ventilator because she had drunk poison meant for me. My son-in-law was somewhere in the city, calling lawyers, calling women I did not yet know about, planning what to do next. Everything I had built over 41 years was under attack from inside my own family, from the people I had trusted most. And I was not afraid. I was not afraid because my mother was with me, because my grandmother was with me, because the woman who was brought to South Carolina in chains in 1798 was with me, because every black woman in my line who had ever been told she was nothing, who had ever been told she would amount to nothing, who had ever been told the world belonged to someone else, was standing behind my wingback chair in my living room at 1 o'clock in the morning on October the 15th, 2026. And the snake had shown its face. I knew exactly where to crush its head. The next morning, Wednesday, October 15th, I woke up at 5:30 the way I had woken up every morning of my adult life. I got down on my knees beside my bed. I thanked the Lord for the breath in my body. I did not thank him for my daughter, and I did not ask him to watch over Terrence. I asked him for one thing only. I asked him for a clear head and a steady hand. Then I got up, I put on a black pantsuit, I pinned my mother's pearl brooch to the lapel, and at 7 o'clock in the morning I walked into the offices of Robinson and Marsh, attorneys at law, on West Peachtree Street, where Angela Robinson was waiting for me with a conference room full of people and a pot of coffee I did not touch. I want to tell you about the people in that room, because they are the reason I am alive to tell this story. At the head of the table sat Angela Robinson, 38 years old, in a charcoal gray suit with her locks pulled back. Her mother, Gloria, had been my mother's best friend at Booker T. Washington High School. Gloria and Ruth used to sit on my mama's porch on Sunday afternoons when Angela and I were little, drinking sweet tea and laughing so hard their shoulders shook. Gloria had passed in 2017. Angela had taken over her mother's law practice 6 years ago and expanded it into the largest black woman-owned law firm in Georgia. To her right sat Marcus was not a name I used, because my mother always said you don't trust a man who has to tell you his name twice. The man on Angela's right was named Isaiah Freeman, 46 years old, a forensic accountant who had spent 12 years with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division before going private. He was a small, neat man with wire-rimmed glasses and hands that moved very slowly over paper. To Angela's left sat Raymond Booker, who had arrived from the hospital at 6:30 that morning with a folder 2 inches thick. Across from me sat my pastor, Jeremiah Walker, 69 years old, in a black suit with a silver tie pin shaped like a cross. I had called him at 4 in the morning. He had not asked a single question. He had said only, "I'll be there, Sister Amanda." Beside Pastor Walker sat my best friend Patricia Jenkins, who had picked me up from my house at 6:45 in her silver Honda Accord, the same car I had watched her drive away in on that last peaceful Sunday. And in the chair beside me, in a clean navy house dress with a fresh white collar she had ironed at 4 in the morning, sat Loretta Washington. Angela laid her hands flat on the conference room table. She looked at me. "Auntie Amanda, before we begin, I need to ask you one question, and I need you to answer it truthfully. Are you sure you want to do this?" I looked around the table. I looked at Raymond Booker. I looked at Isaiah Freeman. I looked at Pastor Walker and Patricia and Loretta. I looked at Angela. "Baby," I said. "I was sure when I was 3 years old and my mother told me a snake was a snake. I'm sure now." "Yes, ma'am." Angela opened her folder. "Let's go to work." What we did that morning between 7 and 11 was burn the house down. Legally, completely, without mercy. By 8:15, every company bank account at Houston Beauty had been frozen on an emergency fraud hold. Terrence's access credentials were revoked. The locks on his office door at the Cascade Road headquarters were being changed by a locksmith Raymond knew personally, a Vietnam veteran who owed him a favor from 1994. By 9, Angela had filed an emergency petition in Fulton County Superior Court for a temporary restraining order against Terrence, barring him from the company premises, from any company accounts, and from any contact with me. By 10, Isaiah Freeman had pulled records I did not know existed. A Cayman Islands account opened in June of 2025 under a shell company called Carter Holdings, LLC. 3 life insurance policies taken out on my life between January and September of 2026, totaling $4,200,000, with Terrence as the sole beneficiary. A rental agreement on a 2-bedroom condominium in Sarasota, Florida, signed in August, in Terrence's name and in the name of a woman I had never heard of, named Kendra Michelle Dupree, 29 years old, originally from Mobile, Alabama. By 10:30, Raymond Booker had a photograph on the table. A photograph of Terrence walking out of a restaurant in Midtown 3 weeks earlier with Kendra Dupree on his arm. A photograph of Terrence and Kendra holding hands at a rooftop bar on West Peachtree. A photograph of Terrence kissing Kendra on the sidewalk in front of a hotel on a Thursday afternoon in September. A Thursday afternoon when he had told my daughter he was in Birmingham on business. Deborah did not know about Kendra. Deborah did not know about the Cayman account. Deborah did not know about the $4.2 million in life insurance. Deborah had believed the whole time that she and her husband were going to inherit her mother's company a little early, maybe force her mother into retirement with some pressure and some engineered health scares, and live happily ever after in their Buckhead mansion. Deborah had not signed up for murder. Isaiah Freeman looked up from his papers and said in his careful voice, "Mrs. Houston, I want to be very precise about what I'm about to say, because it matters. Based on the prescription records I have pulled, your daughter has been ingesting significant doses of alprazolam and clonazepam for the past 14 months. The prescriptions are written to Terrence Carter by a physician in Alpharetta who is currently under investigation by the DEA. Your daughter does not have a prescription for either medication under her own name. These are medications with known effects on memory, judgment, and suggestibility when administered without consent over long periods." Yanyi. I set down my cup of water. "Mr. Freeman, are you telling me my son-in-law has been drugging my daughter?" "Mrs. Houston, I am telling you that your daughter may not have been a fully competent actor in any decision she made in the last 14 months. That is a matter for a forensic psychiatrist to determine, not me. But the pharmacological evidence is clear enough that it will form the centerpiece of her legal defense when the time comes." I sat very still in my chair. Patricia Jenkins reached across the table and took my hand. Pastor Walker said in his quiet voice, "Sister Amanda, I'm going to pray now if you don't mind." He bowed his head. He prayed for my daughter. He prayed for my grandchildren I did not yet have. He prayed for the little girl on the wooden stool. I did not hear most of the prayer. I was hearing instead every Sunday dinner of the last 2 years, every phone call, every time I had watched my daughter's eyes slide slightly out of focus over a glass of wine and thought, "She's tired. She works too hard." I was hearing Deborah on the sofa, biting into the peach turnover, her eyes flicking up at Loretta with that hard, sharp look. And I was asking myself, for the first time, whether that hard, sharp look had belonged to my daughter, or whether it had belonged to the 14 months of pills her husband had been putting in her food. I did not know. I still do not entirely know. But I knew one thing, sitting in that conference room on West Peachtree Street on a Wednesday morning in October. I was not going to bury my daughter twice. I had buried her once already, the night before, in her old bedroom, with her photograph in my hands. I was not going to bury her again until I had every single fact, and even then I was going to be very, very careful about what I put in the grave. "Angela," I said. "Yes, ma'am." "The disinheritance papers we talked about last night." "Yes, ma'am." "Don't draft them. Not yet. Draft them against Terrence only. Draft a temporary trust structure that holds Deborah's potential inheritance and conservatorship for 3 years, conditional on her cooperation with the criminal investigation and completion of a forensic psychiatric evaluation. After 3 years, we reassess." Angela wrote in her yellow pad. "Yes, Auntie." And Angela, "Yes, ma'am. Whatever we do to Terrence Carter, we do all the way. Do you understand me? All the way to the ground. That man walked into my house and laid his schemes on top of my mother's Bible. I want him to spend the rest of his natural life paying for that." Angela Robinson looked up at me from her yellow pad, and there was something in her face that reminded me of her mother Gloria on my mama's porch in 1968, laughing with her shoulders shaking. "Yes, ma'am," Angela said. "All the way to the ground." I did not see Deborah until Thursday afternoon. Dr. Mitchell had kept her sedated for 36 hours while her kidneys flushed the arsenic. When I walked into her private room on the 7th floor of Grady Memorial at 2 o'clock on Thursday, my daughter was awake. She was sitting up against 3 pillows. Her hair was wrapped in a white hospital towel. Her arms were thin, thinner than I had let myself see in 6 months. Her eyes, when they found my face, were the eyes of my 8-year-old on the wooden stool. She started to cry before I said a word. I closed the door behind me. I walked across the room. I sat down in the plastic chair beside her bed. "Mama," she said. "Baby." "Mama, Deborah Ruth, before you say one word, I want you to listen to your mother for 2 minutes. Can you do that for me?" She nodded. The white hospital towel slipped a little on her hair. "Baby, I know about the pills Terrence has been giving you. I know about Kendra Dupree. I know about the condominium in Sarasota. I know about the $4 million of life insurance your husband took out on my life, which you were not a beneficiary on, which he was planning to collect and spend on another woman after he buried both of us. I know about the Cayman account. I know everything, Deborah. Your mama knows." Her face did something I had not seen it do since she was 7 years old, and she had broken my mother's crystal vase. It crumpled. It caved in on itself. My 41-year-old daughter put her hands over her face like a child. "Mama, I didn't know, Mama. I swear on Daddy's grave I didn't know about any of that. I just thought he wanted to take over the company early. I thought you were going to retire anyway. I thought—" "Deborah, stop. Look at me." She took her hands down. She looked at me. "Baby, did you know the coffee was going to hurt me?" She was silent for a long time. A very long time. Long enough that I almost knew the answer before she spoke. "Mama, I knew he was putting something in it that was going to make you feel sick. He said it was just to make you seem a little confused, just to make you seem like you couldn't run things anymore. He said it was the same herbal thing his grandmother used to put in his grandfather's tea when he wouldn't listen to her. He said it was natural. He said it wouldn't hurt you." "Deborah, did you believe him?" My daughter looked at the IV line in her arm. She looked at the window. She looked back at me. "Mama, I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe him so bad, because I wanted the company, Mama. I wanted it, and I thought I deserved it, and I thought you were never going to let it go, and I was tired of waiting." I closed my eyes. I sat with that for a long time. Outside the window, an Atlanta afternoon was going about its business. A MARTA bus was pulling up to a stop. A black woman in a yellow dress was crossing the street with 2 children by the hand. A hawk was circling over the parking lot, the way hawks always circle over Grady Memorial. I opened my eyes. "Deborah," I said, "your mother is going to tell you something, and I am only going to tell you one time, and you are going to carry it with you for the rest of your life." "Yes, Mama. You wanted the company more than you wanted your mother. That is the truth that came out of your mouth just now, and we are both going to live with it for the rest of our lives. You did not put the arsenic in that cup. I know that now. But you held the cup. You drove it across town. You put it in my hand. And you watched me drink it. And you did not stop me. Because you wanted what was behind my death more than you wanted my life." She was weeping now, silently. The tears ran down her face into the collar of the hospital gown. "I am going to tell you what I am going to do, Deborah. And I am going to tell you now so you can decide who you want to be going forward." "Yes, Mama. I am going to cooperate with the police in every possible way to put Terrence Carter in a federal prison for the rest of his life. You are going to cooperate too. Today. This afternoon. Detective Booker is down the hall. You are going to tell him everything. Every phone call, every email, every pill, every lie. Do you understand me?" "Yes, Mama." Number 2, you are not going to inherit Houston Beauty. Not now, not in 3 years, not ever. The company is going into a foundation in my mother Ruth's name to lift up black women starting businesses in the American South, the way my mother lifted up me. You understand? She closed her eyes. "Yes, Mama." Number 3, you are going to complete a full forensic psychiatric evaluation to determine to what extent the pills Terrence was giving you affected your judgment. If the evaluation shows what Mr. Freeman thinks it will show, your lawyer will have an opportunity to negotiate probation instead of prison time on the conspiracy charges. If it shows otherwise, you will go to prison and I will visit you there, because I am still your mother. Either way, baby, your life as you knew it is over." "Yes, Mama." And number 4, I leaned forward in the plastic chair. I put my right hand over her left hand on the white hospital blanket. Her hand was cold. I held it in mine. "Deborah Ruth Houston, I love you. I have loved you every day of your 41 years on this earth. I loved you when you were in my body, and I loved you when you came out of my body, and I loved you through your teething and your chicken pox and your broken heart at the 9th grade dance and your graduation from Spelman and your wedding at Wheat Street Baptist, and I love you right now, sitting in this hospital bed, after what you did. That love is not going anywhere, baby. Do you hear me?" "Yes, Mama. But you are not coming home. Not to my house, not to my company, not to my life the way it was. You and I are going to see each other 1 time a week, at a restaurant I will pick, for 45 minutes. That is going to be our relationship now, For the next few years, maybe for the rest of my life. Do you understand what I am telling you?" She was crying too hard to speak. She nodded. The white hospital towel finally slipped off her head and fell onto the pillow. I reached out. I picked up the towel. I put it back on my daughter's head, the way I used to put a towel on her head when she was a little girl getting out of the bathtub. "Mama loves you, baby," I said, and I walked out of the room. In the hallway, Raymond Booker was waiting on a bench, his gray felt hat in his lap. He looked up when I closed the door. "Mrs. Houston, how we doing?" "Detective, she's ready to talk to you. She's going to cooperate." "Yes, ma'am. And you? How are you doing?" I thought about the question. I thought about it honestly. "Raymond," I said. I used his first name for the first time. "I am doing the best a 68-year-old woman can do on the day after her only child tried to kill her. Which is to say, I am still standing, and the Lord is still breathing in my body, and there is more work to do." He stood up. He nodded once. He said, "Yes, ma'am, there is." The confrontation with Terrence Carter happened on Monday, October 20th, at 11 o'clock in the morning, in the large conference room at Robinson and Marsh on West Peachtree Street. Terrence arrived with Jonathan Blackwell, the most expensive criminal defense attorney in Atlanta. He was wearing a navy pinstripe suit and a silver tie. He had shaved that morning. He had not slept much, I could tell, but he had done the things a man does to make himself look innocent. He walked into the conference room with the kind of small, confident smile a man wears when he thinks he is about to negotiate. He was not about to negotiate. He was about to be dismantled. I was sitting at the head of the table in the same black pantsuit and the same pearl brooch. Angela Robinson sat on my right. Isaiah Freeman sat on my left. Raymond Booker stood against the wall behind me. Beside Raymond stood an FBI agent named Special Agent Evelyn Carter, no relation, from the Atlanta field office, who had flown in from Washington the night before. Terrence saw Agent Carter, and the small, confident smile slipped, just for a moment. Then he recovered. "Mother Houston," he said as he sat down across from me, "I am so relieved we could all come together to clear this up." I did not answer him. I looked at Angela. Angela Robinson opened the folder in front of her. She began to lay documents on the conference table, one at a time, sliding them across the polished wood toward Terrence Carter and Jonathan Blackwell. She did not speak as she laid them down. She did not need to. The Cayman Islands bank statements. One by one. 17 of them. The 3 life insurance policies. One by one. Photographs of Terrence and Kendra Dupree in Midtown, at the rooftop bar, on the sidewalk in front of the hotel. The rental agreement on the Sarasota condominium. Email printouts from a secondary account Terrence had not known Isaiah Freeman could access, in which Terrence and Kendra discussed, in writing, the timeline of my death and the distribution of my assets. The DEA investigation file on the Alpharetta physician who had been writing unauthorized prescriptions for alprazolam and clonazepam in Terrence's name. Deborah's written statement, signed on Thursday afternoon in the hospital, 4 single-spaced pages, detailing 14 months of pills and lies. The laboratory analysis of the coffee cup, which Loretta had quietly bagged and preserved on Tuesday morning before the paramedics arrived, on the instruction of no one, because Loretta Washington had known exactly what she was doing from the moment she stumbled on the Oriental rug. Finally, Angela laid down a federal indictment, signed by a grand jury in the Northern District of Georgia on Friday afternoon, charging Terrence Lamar Carter with conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder across state lines, wire fraud, insurance fraud, and the unlawful administration of controlled substances. The indictment was 17 pages long. Jonathan Blackwell read the first page. He read the second page. He set the indictment down. He turned to his client. He said very quietly, "Terrence, I need you to stop talking. I need you to stop talking right now." Terrence did not stop talking. Terrence stood up. Terrence lost his mind. "This is a setup. This is a black woman with a grudge and a housekeeper with a notebook, and you expect me to—" "Mr. Carter." Agent Carter stepped forward from the wall. "Sit down." "You sit down. You—" "Mr. Carter, sit down." He sat down. I had not spoken a word yet. I had watched him the way my mother used to watch a pot on the stove, waiting for it to come to the right kind of boil. I spoke now. "Terrence Lamar Carter." He looked at me. And for the first time in the 18 years I had known him, he looked at me with his real face. Not the Morehouse smile. Not the pocket square. Not the salesman eyes. His real face was the face of a boy from Augusta, Georgia, who had never had what he wanted, who had looked at a rich black woman's company and her daughter and her house, and decided he was going to take them, because he believed, somewhere deep down in his spirit, that a black woman like me did not deserve to have them in the first place. I looked at that face. I let myself see it. And then I said the words I had been building up to, word by word, since my mother wrote her note to me in pencil in May of 1975. Terrence, you looked at me, and you saw a black woman who was old, who was religious, who had lost her husband, who loved her daughter. And you decided those things made me weak. You were wrong, son. Those are not the things that make a black woman weak. Those are the things that make a black woman dangerous. The room was completely silent. My mother washed white folks' laundry in the city of Atlanta for 31 years so I could sit at this table today. My grandmother cleaned a Baptist church in Macon, Georgia, on her hands and knees for 42 years so my mother could wash that laundry. My great-grandmother Ethel was born in a sharecropper's shack outside of Vidalia in 1887 so my grandmother could clean that church. And their great-great-grandmother Hagar was brought out of the hold of a slave ship in Charleston Harbor in 1798 so Ethel could be born. I leaned forward slightly in my chair. That is 6 generations of black women, Terrence, standing behind me in this room right now. 6 generations of women who were called weak by men who thought they were strong, and who outlasted every single one of those men. I am the daughter of those women. I am their daughter in my bones and in my blood and in my mouth right now. And you thought you could poison me with arsenic in a paper cup. I let those words sit. You are going to federal prison, son, for the rest of your natural life if I have anything to say about it. And when you are lying on that cot at night in the dark, in whatever federal facility they send you to, I want you to remember one thing. I forgave you, Terrence. I forgave you on Sunday afternoon, on my knees in my bedroom, because my mother's mother's mother did not bleed for me through 6 generations, so I could let a man like you poison my soul the way you tried to poison my body. I forgave you, son, not because you deserve it, because I refuse to carry you one more step in this life. He opened his mouth. Jonathan Blackwell put a hand on his arm. I stood up. We are done here. I walked out of the conference room. Angela Robinson walked out behind me. Raymond Booker walked out behind her. Isaiah Freeman walked out behind him. Agent Carter and her 3 agents stayed behind in the conference room with Terrence Lamar Carter and his very expensive lawyer. Terrence was arrested that afternoon at 4:47 p.m. on the sidewalk outside the Robinson and Marsh building. The arrest was photographed by a reporter from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, whose editor had been tipped off. The photograph ran on the front page of the Metro section the next morning, under the headline, Houston Beauty CFO Arrested in Alleged Poisoning Plot. Patricia Jenkins clipped the article out of the paper. She laminated it. She gave it to me as a Christmas present that year. It is on my refrigerator to this day, beside the crayon drawing Jasmine made of a black Jesus with an afro. 6 months have passed since that Tuesday in October. It is April of 2027 now, and the dogwoods are blooming in Atlanta the way they always do, white and pink along Cascade Road. And I am sitting on my front porch in the late afternoon, drinking a cup of coffee from a white ceramic mug. And I want to tell you how things stand. Terrence Lamar Carter accepted a plea agreement in February. 28 years in federal prison. No possibility of parole. He is serving his sentence at the Federal Correctional Institution in Edgefield, South Carolina, about 3 hours from my house. I have not written to him. I will not write to him. He wrote to me once, in March. The envelope was unopened when I put it in the fireplace. Kendra Michelle Dupree was charged as a co-conspirator. She took a cooperating plea in January. She is serving 6 years at a women's facility in Florida. Her family, I have learned, disowned her publicly in the local Mobile newspaper. I do not take pleasure in that. I am just telling you what happened. Deborah accepted probation. 5 years with mandatory inpatient treatment for alprazolam dependency, mandatory psychiatric counseling, and 150 hours of community service. She spent 60 days at a residential treatment center in North Carolina in November and December. She came home clean for the first time in almost 2 years. She does not live with me. She does not work at Houston Beauty. She lives in a small 1-bedroom apartment in Decatur, on a quiet street with oak trees and a community garden at the end of the block. She works as a cashier at a used bookstore called Wordsmiths, 3 blocks from her apartment. She makes $15 an hour. She rides the MARTA train to work. She has gained back 11 of the 17 pounds she had lost. Deborah and I have lunch every Saturday at 12:30 in the afternoon at a restaurant called the Busy Bee Cafe on Martin Luther King Jr. Drive. 45 minutes. That is our agreement. She orders the smothered pork chops. I order the baked chicken. We do not talk about Terrence. We do not talk about the company. We talk about Jasmine, who is now 7 and reading at a 4th grade level. We talk about Patricia's granddaughter Olivia, who took her first steps in March. We talk about the sermon from Pastor Walker that Sunday. We do not touch each other when we arrive or when we leave. We sit across from each other, 2 black women, and we eat our food and we talk. Is it a relationship? I do not know. It is what a relationship looks like when something has died between 2 people who still love each other. It is not what I wanted. It is what we have. Loretta Washington is no longer my housekeeper. Loretta Washington is the executive director of the Ruth Prescott Foundation, named for my mother, and she earns $95,000 a year with benefits. The foundation is headquartered in a 3-story brick building at the corner of Auburn Avenue and Jackson Street, 4 blocks from the house I was born in. In 6 months, we have funded 34 black women entrepreneurs across 7 southern states. Our first grantee was a young woman in Birmingham who makes natural hair products in her mother's kitchen. She cried when Loretta handed her the check. Loretta cried too. I watched them on a video call from my living room, and I cried with both of them. Jasmine calls me Grandma Amanda. She comes over on Sunday afternoons after church. She helps me in the garden. She tells me about her teacher, Miss Simmons, who is, in Jasmine's words, the prettiest black lady in the whole world, Grandma Amanda, prettier than even the news ladies on Channel 2. Patricia Jenkins and I still sit on the porch on Sunday afternoons. We still drink sweet tea out of the tall green glasses. Her granddaughter Olivia comes too now, and toddles across my lawn in little white sandals, and Patricia and I watch her the way our mothers watched us, and we do not say what we are thinking because we do not need to. Raymond Booker still works cases for the foundation. He charges me $1 per case. I pay him in a handwritten check because he keeps them all in a drawer and will not cash them. Angela Robinson got married last month to a lovely man named Gerald who teaches history at Morehouse. I cried at the wedding. I think Angela's mother Gloria cried too, somewhere. Pastor Jeremiah Walker retired in March. At his retirement service, he preached a sermon on the 31st chapter of Proverbs. He looked at me when he preached it. I looked back. Last Sunday morning, I sat on my front porch with Loretta, and we drank coffee together. Good coffee. Fresh ground. From the roaster on Peachtree Street, as it happens, though not the one Deborah used to bring. A different one. A family-owned place. A black family. I go there twice a week now. I pay with cash. Loretta said, Miss Amanda. Yes, baby. Do you ever hate her? I thought about the question. I thought about it honestly. I watched a mockingbird land on the crepe myrtle tree in my front yard. The same mockingbird, or maybe a different one. I watched a red pickup truck drive down Cascade Road, a little black boy waving from the passenger window, his father waving his free hand at nobody in particular. I felt the April sun on my face. Loretta, I said, I am 68 years old. I buried my daddy at 34. I buried my mother at 41. I buried my husband at 56. And on October the 14th, I buried the daughter I thought I had, even though the body is still walking around in Decatur working at a bookstore. Hate? I do not have time for hate, baby. I do not have that much life left. I only have time to live. I took a sip of coffee. But I will tell you what is strange, Loretta. What is strange, Miss Amanda? The cup of coffee that was supposed to kill me. It is the cup of coffee that taught me how to live. Loretta did not answer. She put her hand on top of my hand on the arm of the wicker chair. She left it there for a long time. The mockingbird sang. The April sun moved across the porch. So that is my story. That is all of it, as far as I am going to tell it to strangers. Now I want to talk to you, whoever you are, watching this, however you came to be here on the day this found you. I want to say 3 things, and then I am going to stop talking, and you can go back to your afternoon. The first thing is this. If somebody in your life, somebody you love, somebody whose face you have been looking at your whole life is making you sick, and you have been telling yourself it is your age, it is your stress, it is your hormones, it is your imagination, it is your fault somehow. I want you to go see your doctor. Not their doctor. Not your family's doctor. Your doctor. And I want you to ask for a full metabolic panel and a heavy metals test. I am not a doctor. I am just a woman who should have asked sooner. Ask sooner. The second thing is this. The people who love you do not make you prove it. They do not make you earn it. They do not put it in a cup and ask you to drink. If somebody in your life has you spending your days trying to figure out whether they love you, baby, you already have your answer. Real love is not a riddle. Real love is the woman who has cleaned your house for 22 years, who risks her own job and her granddaughter's future to whisper 6 words in your ear on a Tuesday morning. That is what love looks like. If you do not recognize it, it is because you have never been shown it. That is not your fault. But you can start learning now. You can start today. The third thing is this, and then I am done. Family is not a blood type. Family is a choice made every morning by people who choose to protect you and cherish you. Somebody can share every single drop of your blood and not be your family. Somebody can share not one single drop of your blood and be more family to you than anybody you ever came out of a womb with. My daughter and I share blood. Loretta Washington and I do not share one single drop. I love them both, but I know which one of them is my family. I learned it the hard way, in a paper cup on the 14th of October. So here is what I want to leave you with. If somebody in your life is handing you a cup of something and your soul is telling you not to drink, please listen to your soul. Listen to the voice that is older than you are. Listen to the mothers behind you. They know. And if a woman you barely notice, a woman who cleans your house or cuts your hair or rings up your groceries, ever whispers something to you that does not make sense, stop. Put the cup down. Listen. She may be the only person in the room who is actually on your side. My name is Amanda Houston. I am 68 years old. The coffee that was meant to kill me is the reason I am still alive. Thank you for listening to my story. Now go call somebody who loves you.